Tomorrow I die, and before that last and solemn hour arrives, I feel impelled, as though by some irresistible force, to unburden my soul of a tale at once singular, terrible, and almost beyond belief. It is not simply the narrative of a crime, but the history of a slow and dreadful transformation, a descent from gentleness into brutality, from kindness into a madness which now, at the end, crouches at my side as surely as the shadow of the gallows. And so I write in this dim cell where the candle flickers and the damp walls echo my heartbeat, knowing that each word may be my last, yet hoping that by confessing I may at least set forth a warning for those who, like me, imagine they are safe from the darker impulses that lurk within every human soul. In my earliest years, I was marked by a softness of disposition, a tenderness of heart, a love for animals so deep that my companions would smile at the sight of me feeding a stray bird or carrying a wounded dog in my arms, and this habit of sympathy grew with me into manhood, so that when I married a woman of similar tastes, our household soon became a little sanctuary filled with living creatures, not merely for our amusement, because we genuinely delighted in their presence, their trustful eyes, their playful movements, their mute but eloquent affection. And among all these there was one, a large and beautiful black cat, whom we called Pluto, remarkable for its size, its glossy coat, its intelligence, and above all for the quiet fidelity with which it followed me through every room and even out into the garden, so that when I sat in my study it perched upon my shoulder or curled upon my knee, and at night it lay at the foot of my bed, purring with a sound more soothing than any lullaby. Thus the years passed, gently and happily, and if there was any fault in my nature it was perhaps a certain weakness for strong drink, a weakness which, at first mild and occasional, deepened gradually into a habit, and then a craving, and then a tyrannical disease, until the very temper of my soul altered. My manner grew harsh, my language coarse, my hand unsteady and often raised in anger at those who had never harmed me, and what had been a peaceful home became a place of irritability and gloom, my wife retreating into silence and tears, the animals cowering at my approach, and yet through all this Pluto still clung to me, forgiving, patient, affectionate, until even his presence became an unendurable reproach to my conscience, and one night, returning home in a state of maddened intoxication, I fancied he avoided me, drew back, shrank from my touch, and in that instant of perverse rage which so often marks the drunkard I seized him by the throat, and when, terrified and suffering, he bit my hand, I, like a demon urged on by some fiend, drew a small penknife from my pocket, opened it, and with deliberate cruelty cut out one of his eyes, leaving him howling and bleeding upon the floor. I shudder even now at the memory, yet at the time I felt a grim satisfaction, a vile pleasure in the act itself, for the spirit of perverseness, that unaccountable longing of the soul to do wrong simply because it is wrong, had seized me and would not let me go, and though the poor beast recovered, going about the house maimed and trembling, I at last, after days of brooding guilt mixed with hatred, slipped a noose about his neck one morning and hanged him to the branch of a tree in our garden, hanged him though he had loved me, hanged him because I knew he loved me, and because, in that dark recess of the heart where reason cannot penetrate, I felt that his love was an accusation and his presence a burden. No sooner was the deed done than the horror of it smote me, but the deed could not be undone, and that very night a calamity overtook us. Our house, with all its contents, was consumed by flames, and though my wife and I barely escaped with our lives, all our possessions were lost. On the following day I visited the ruins and found, standing alone amid the charred timbers, one wall, a fragment of plaster still upright, and upon this wall was imprinted, as though by some infernal hand, the gigantic figure of a cat with a rope about its neck, a vision so clear, so unmistakable, that a crowd gathered to see it, many trying to explain it by natural causes, yet to me it was a terror and a mystery that pressed upon my mind like a weight, and for months thereafter I could not free myself from the image nor from the sense that some judgment hung over me. Yet perverseness clung to me still, and in my restless search for relief I wandered one night into a disreputable tavern where, among the filth and smoke, I beheld a creature so like Pluto that I could scarcely believe my eyes, a large black cat, nearly the same size and shape, with one striking difference. Upon its breast a patch of pure white, irregular in form but bright against the dark fur. I spoke to it, and it followed me, and I brought it home. And from that hour it attached itself to me with an affection so intrusive that it soon became an object of irritation rather than of pleasure. For it followed me from room to room, leapt upon my knees unbidden, crouched upon my breast as I slept, so that I awoke gasping beneath its weight and the hot breath of its mouth upon my face, and gradually, as days turned into weeks, I began to dread this creature, to shrink from its caress, to tremble at its presence, while at the same time its affection grew more persistent, more unavoidable. Worse still, the white patch upon its breast began slowly to change, at first vaguely, then more distinctly, until at last it assumed a shape which filled my soul with horror and superstition. It became the image of a gallows, the very emblem of crime and punishment, outlined in white upon the beast's dark fur, as though some mocking destiny had branded it there to haunt me with the prospect of my own doom. My wife, gentle and patient as ever, sought to soothe me, but her efforts were vain, for my fear of the cat turned into hatred, and my hatred into a murderous desire, until one day, descending into the cellar with her upon some household errand, the animal nearly threw me down the stairs by running between my legs, and seized by a fury beyond words I lifted an axe to strike it dead then and there, but my wife, alarmed by my expression, caught my arm to stop me, and in that instant my rage, diverted but not lessened, fell upon her. One blow, and she lay lifeless at my feet, the one human being who had never ceased to love me. From the horror of that act there sprang at once a cold and deliberate cunning. I determined to conceal the body, and with a composure which was almost joyful in its desperation, I set about the task, walling her corpse up within the brickwork of the cellar, so neatly and solidly that no eye, no hand could suspect the secret, and when it was done I felt a grim and ghastly sense of triumph, for the cat, whose death I had intended, had disappeared, and for the first time in many days I slept soundly, free from its tormenting presence. Days passed, and my confidence grew, so that when the police, having heard rumors, came to search the house, I received them with perfect composure, led them from room to room, even into the cellar, speaking lightly, jesting upon their diligence, and at last, to demonstrate the solidity of my walls, I rapped with my cane upon the very spot where behind bricks lay my wife's corpse, and at that touch, as though summoned from the depths of hell, there rose from within a sound, a cry, a long, loud, and continuous shriek, such as no human throat could utter, a howl, a wail, a lament that filled the cellar with horror and froze every drop of blood in my veins. The officers sprang back, and then, with crowbars in hands, tore down the bricks, and there, before their eyes, stood the body of my wife, already decaying yet upright in the cavity where I had placed it, and upon her head, glaring with red and fiery eyes, its mouth open in a screech of triumph, sat the very black cat whose life I had spared, whose torment I had endured, whose presence had haunted me, and whose cunning had now delivered me to justice. I had walled the monster up with the corpse, and now, at last, its cry had betrayed me. I write these lines as I await the scaffold, and as the candle burns low and the iron bars cast long shadows across the floor, I know not whether what has happened is the work of chance, of conscience, or of some darker agency beyond our comprehension. But this I know, that I, once gentle, became a murderer through drink, passion, and a perversity which mocked every vestige of humanity, and that I am undone, not by man but by my own hand, and by a black cat whose unblinking eyes seem even now to watch me as the gallows draws near.